Hello. Hello, and welcome to today's fly tying stream. Happy 4th of July weekend, y'all. We're just gonna chill. I'm not expecting too many people to be watching today since it is a holiday. So we're gonna do something a little bit different, a little bit chill. Um, we're going to tie a freestyle married wing fly, and I'll talk a little bit about my inspiration for it. Just a quick note: you might notice the lights coming from a different side. I have switched around my office guest room situation. The guest bed and the desk have rotated basically 180 degrees. So now instead of the bed being under the window, the desk is under the window. So hopefully the lighting will be a little bit better. Um, and let's get started. A few quick announcements. As always, if you want to see more of my work, you can check out my Instagram. It's at justwondering.brad. Sorry, at justwondering.brad. Excuse me. And if you want to support the stream, if you want to help me upgrade my technology, um, you can check out my Etsy shop, Studio1213. All of the money from the Etsy shop goes back into the channel, either like I said, updating the technology or buying new materials or replacement materials. And I appreciate everyone who has supported me that way. So yeah, the fly we're going to tie today is a freestyle married wing streamer. It's going to be on this. This is either 4 or 6x. I think it's a 4x long streamer hook. This is a vintage hook. I don't actually know the make of it because I think I was gifted this at like a show. I just need a business card or something. 1 second. I like to use business cards to protect my hooks because they're handy, and also because I don't usually tie on hooks that are sensitive. Probably the best way to protect your hook is with um, vice jaws that are mirror polished. Basically, if you have highly polished like vice jaws, or in principle, this is true for any kind of like metalworking or like jewelry making. If your plier jaws or your vice jaws are mirror polished, then it won't mar the finish of whatever you're working on. But because I don't give too much of a rip, and also I don't tie on flies that are all that sensitive. The Ron Lucas hooks are very nicely made and so well finished. They don't really need much more protection. Um, if I were tying on, say, like a gun blued hook, then I would definitely want something more polished to hold it in. Let's see. Pull out my bobbins, pliers, hackle pliers. So the inspiration for this fly actually comes from um, the books Rare and Unusual Fly Tying Materials by Schmuckler. And I think there was one other person who helped, but I don't remember. Schmuckler and Sills. Uh, and also, they have another book, Forgotten Patterns. Um, I actually have never seen those books in person. I've only ever seen the advertisements for when they came out. Back in the, I think, late '90s or early 2000s. Um, and I was a kid, um, And I lusted over those books, and I still do. But man, they are so expensive, but they're so beautifully shot, and they have all these like weird patterns and flies in it. And like I said, I've never seen the inside of those books, so I don't actually know what's in the inside. But the covers, just the covers alone, were enough to make me want them. Uh, but I think it's on the back cover of one of the forgotten or one of the unusual and rare and unusuals. They have a couple of married wing um, uh, streamers, um, and and really it's those advertisements for the rare and unusual. The pictures that went with the advertisements and all of that. In addition to the fly tire magazines themselves, back when they had quite a bit of classic stuff in them, that really inspired me to get into classic fly tying. Oh, where did my trash can go? Yeah, so those advertisements in Fly Tire magazine and Fly Tire magazines themselves really got me into classic fly tying. I think I've told this story before, but my very first issue that I ever picked up in like a bookstore of Fly Tire was a '96 issue, and I've got pictures of the cover on my Instagram. But that issue had a whole section on Mary Arvis Marbury flies and an article on how to make your own hooks. Um, and I was just as a kid, I was really into making things. I was into painting models, building models. Uh, you know, I tried to build a tree house in an old apple tree that my parents had in their backyard. So I was really into making things. I was like, oh, I want to make hooks, and I want to tie these, beautiful classic flies. I've got the classic flies part down. I've done some hook reworking, but living in a less than 1,000 square foot apartment with no shop facilities has kind of made it impossible to actually make hooks, largely because I just can't, I can't be banging on things to cut barbs and that sort of thing. So, but anyway, those early fly tire magazines with those articles on classic flies, classic salmon flies in particular, um, really influenced my interest in fly tying. Before that, um, I've been tying flies since God, well, since I was 5. So I've been tying flies since I was 5. Whenever the hell that was. Before that, I was mostly into your typical streamers or nymph streamers. I think the closest I'd ever gotten to a truly classic fly was tying like Bergman wets, which are beautiful in their own right, but man, it's hard to compare with like a full, size classic salmon fly. um, so yeah, so this is definitely inspired by some of the flies that are found on the cover of Rare and Unusual. Um, and we'll just see how this goes. I don't really. I have a color palette that I'm working with today. I don't have a particular plan. I've done um, married winged streamers before, but they were rather simple. And I have an idea that I want this to be somewhat similar to a Carrie Stevens fly, but with a married wing. So we'll see. We'll see how this goes. going to lay down a underbody. It doesn't need to be much of an underbody because this is just this is a long-bodied streamer, so they tend to be fairly skinny in the body and have most of the bulk made up within the wing. Like I said, I think this is like a 4-aught or 4x long hook. But yeah, we're just making this up as we go. We'll see how this turns out. Just a chill, just a relaxed stream today. Chat. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And I'll do my best to answer. I'm not. My expertise is fairly narrow. I'm not a fly historian. There are a lot of guys out there who are great fly historians. I'm mostly a technician. I'm mostly interested in either replicating a certain style or understanding like how these flies were constructed. There are some people who know the history of like the Green Highlander down to like the dates that first appeared in print. I'm not like that. I just like tying these flies. All right. I realize that I am. Oh wait, I do have some. I have these big spools of really fine flat tinsel, but they're too big to fit in my case, so they go elsewhere. And I always forget I have them, which I probably need to take a little bit off these larger spools and put them on some smaller spools, but I just haven't had the opportunity to yet. But this is some very fine Vineyards. I don't know if you can quite read that, but that's Vineyards flat silver. Basically, we're going to do just because of the way because of the way I want this to taper. We're actually normally I would do a double layer, but because I want there to be a slight taper, I'm actually going to do like a layer and a half. And just hope that there's no bump. Because and I'm going to give this a butt because I don't trust myself to tie a very smooth transition. I realize that's not very Carrie Stevens like, but this is not a Carrie Stevens streamer. So one of the things I've been working on in kind of the background for this channel, not the stream particularly, but the channel in general, is I've been experimenting with different softwares for doing like edited videos. So hopefully that'll be coming soon. One of the problems that I'm having right now is that the computer that I use for editing is an older computer, and I've upgraded a number of components, but it still takes forever to render stuff. So that's probably something I'll be looking to upgrade in the near future. But for now, it works. The other thing is the only camera that I have to shoot on is a GoPro, and while the GoPro is a pretty good camera, um, it does, because of the setup around setting it into a like a mount that can go, be placed where I want it to. It takes up a lot of space, surprisingly, uh, because I want to actually put the camera like right here, right in front of me, and ideally, what I would have is a really small like webcam, uh, but I don't have a really small webcam. So, the GoPro actually shoots really high quality video though, which is why I like it. But it just makes tying, particularly salmon flies, really difficult because if you watch me tie, I'm like up and over, and I get really close, and having a camera right in front of me is really distracting. Um, no excuses, just saying. So I haven't quite figured out a good way to attach it to the bench in front of me in a way that isn't obtrusive. So yeah. Now, like I said, I'm working off a color palette, even though I don't have a particular plan. I do have a color palette that I'm using. So basically, the color palette is a little bit of this like light claret, and then blue, various shades of blue. Um, so the wing will be blue, but then like the throat. One of the things that I'm still debating on is whether to use bucktail for the throat, like the hair part of the throat, like you would see on a Carrie Stevens, um, or whether I'm going to use polar bear or black bear. I have both of those options, uh, but I haven't quite made a decision yet on those. So there's the tail. Because this is a fancy gaudy fly. Of course, can have a butt. It's always funny going to shows because everybody, a lot of people, it, a hurl butt is not one of those things you think people notice about a fly, and yet, in my experience, um, I get a lot of comments on like, "Hey, nice butt," and that's always a little bit amusing. But having a nice hurl butt is a really nice accent to have on a fly. So I'm going to use Lagarten. This is their embossed silver tinsel, medium silver tinsel. Um, it's one of the nicer embossing patterns. Yeah, not much to say about it other than, hey, it's a nice tinsel. I hope everybody has been having a good holiday weekend. Hope everybody's been staying safe. Of course, living in the DC area, I've had a lot of fireworks. A lot of frightened looking puppies out there. Um, so, uh, if you watched any of my streams before, you know that if I'm doing like a dubbed body, I won't spend quite so much time binding down materials after the tail. But because this is going to be a silk-bodied fly, I'm going to pay attention a little bit more to to what goes under it. You really want a smooth underbody to go under floss, because the floss will show any kind of unevenness. Now, it doesn't have to be perfectly smooth. It doesn't have you don't have to have a glass smooth underbody, but you just don't want it to have like any rolling hills or bumps or dips or anything like that because that will show through. Kind of the same with a tinsel body. You just want to make sure that your underbody is super smooth. Um, Super smooth, no bumps. But again, it doesn't have to be perfectly glass smooth. All right, so I have this beautiful bright blue uh, JEC silk. This is 525 for if you're going by numbers. I have not used this color. I'm interested to see what this looks like on a fly. Normally, I would use 527, which is a like a dark royal blue. But I kind of want to try something a little bit brighter for this fly. So we are going with this. And this is a 4x long hook, so I have no idea how much floss, because I don't tie flies like this very often. So I have no idea how much floss I'm actually going to need. So I think I probably spun off a few extra inches or feet even, but it's all right. Oop. Fingers are feeling a little bit rough. So I just have one of those pumice stones. You can find these. I think mostly they're used for like smoothing out people's like heels and if you have calluses. But if you have any rough spots on your fingers, you can just use the pumice to take off the rough spots. and I just keep one of those by my fly tying desk. Um, that's not too bad, and that just helps because I don't like to tie with gloves. I know there are people who do, and that's great, but yeah, just ain't for me. I like being able to feel what's going on because the thing is, if you're wearing gloves and you can still catch the silk on things wearing gloves, but if you do catch it on something, it's harder to feel that if you're wearing gloves. So prefer just to do it the old-fashioned way. I just want the silk to go on flat, so I'm constantly taking the twist out of it and just side by side wrapping all the way down. This is such a long shank. I think this is like a size 2 hook, but because it's got, it's a 4x long shank, it's probably about as long as like a 6/0 salmon fly hook. Now, a 6/0 salmon fly hook, I would put a much thicker underbody on, so it'd be a lot more silk involved in tying such a fly as that. Uh, but this is right up there. You'll notice that I wiggle my hands back and forth, and that just helps kind of flatten out the silk, spread it out a little bit, um, and helps it fill in if there's any kind of you know irregularities, like minor irregularities. We're not talking like big dips and divots, but like minor irregularities in the underbody. It just helps the silk fill those in a little bit, and that just helps keep the body as smooth as possible. Okay. On the second layer, I'm just going to wrap this. Again, always taking the twist out of it and just doing side by side wraps. That's a pretty color. I really like this color. Like I said, I've never had an opportunity to use this on the fly. I recently ordered this from John McClane, uh, like I do everything. Um, but yeah, this is actually quite a pretty color, and it really goes well with this claret schlappen that I've used for the tail. So nice. Unexpectedly revolve. I will actually think I will not have wasted too much silk. If you're just joining, or if you weren't here for the introduction, I'm tying this fly, which is inspired by the flies on the. I believe it's the back cover of one of the Rare and Unusuals, which. I don't know what happened here. happened at the front. Don't know what. Yeah, so on the covers of one of the rare and unusuals, there were pictures of married wing streamer flies. And as a kid, growing up, I remember the advertisements for the rare and unusual books. And of course, uh, lusted after those books. Like I mentioned, I still kind of do. Just the covers. I've never actually seen the inside of any of those books. So one of these days, maybe. But man, they are so expensive now. Um, I don't, I don't believe I ever will. But you know, nope. Uh, but yeah, the flies that they had on their covers were just absolutely gorgeous. Um, they were in those first issues of Fly Tire. The advertisements for the original advertisements for those books were in some of the original Fly Tire magazines that I received as a young Fly Tire, as a kid essentially. And yeah, um, those just those advertisements alone, I credit for inspiring me to go into or to become interested in classic sound flies. So um, beautiful books, beautiful flies. Totally inspired me to do this. That and like I said, the original uh, Fly Tire magazines I got. The first issue had a bunch of Mary Over Smurbury flies. So okay, so that's the body, the basis of our kind of fuzzy of our streamer. So I think throat is next, and I think hmm, debating. What should I? Like I said, I have a color palette, but I don't have a plan. I'm gonna go with I think mm, bucktail. I'm gonna go with bucktail because it's a little bit brighter white, and the thing about polar bear is that it's kind of this off white, which is very beautiful. Um, but I don't think it's a little. I think for this fly, I think I want something a little bit more kind of artificially bright, especially to contrast with. I'm going to use a lot of dark colors in the wings, so I think I'm going to go with a brighter white for the throat. Um, yeah, yeah, we'll do that. So bucktail. Um, this is not a very well used bucktail because I don't tie a whole lot of bucktail flies. Okay. I'm just gonna roughly kind of stack them. I'm not actually going to fully stack it because um, I kind of, my personal preference is not for that perfectly straight across look. Um, let's see. I have a reference photo pulled up behind here. So I can see. Uh, in order to keep the bucktail from spinning, I'm gonna loop, put a loop around it, and that way it stays on the bottom. So what I did is I took my thread, and if this is the bucktail and this is the hook shank, I went around, or sorry, if this is the hook shank and this is the bucktail, I took a loop around the bucktail, just the bucktail, and then I took a loop around the bucktail and the hook shank, and that just keeps it in place, keeps it from spinning. It is deer hair; it will want to spin, and I don't want it to spin. So, where is my scissors? Uh, oh, I put the bucktail away over there and put my scissors with it. Um, High quality YouTube television thing. Swear to God. Trim that off. As usual, gonna wax my thread because it wouldn't be a just wondering ties classic flies unless I'm using wax thread all the time. All right. So with that, I'm going to add a little bit of color, a little bit of this claret. This is kind of more of a wine claret or like a light claret rather than like a dark Irish style claret. Um, Maybe even more towards the side of like puce. I really like it. And this is schloppen, by the way, not like neck hackle. Trim that up a little bit more. Unlike a salmon fly, I'm trying not to crowd the eye too much. I do want a little bit of room. It doesn't have to be like a whole lot of straight or free shank or bare shank, but just a little bit. Okay. For the underwing, I'm going to use a little bit of peacock curl, just a couple of 4 strands of peacock. And this is the really fine curl from near the eye. So here on the eye, it's kind of this curl there. And I did cut 2 from each side, and basically it's just so that when I bundle them together, they just kind of balance each other into a nice compact-ish bundle. loop. I'm misplacing everything today. Yeah. Go. All right. So for the wing, we are going to do essentially a married wing. Ooh. And the colors that I have for the married wing are a kind of royal, a brightish royal blue, and black, and speckled mustard. And um, and because this is a streamer shank and not like a salmon fly shank, I want a little bit longer underwing here. Because this is a streamer hook and not a salmon hook, um, the hook gap isn't very big. So I'm not going to do a very thick wing. uh, Probably in the neighborhood of about 16 fibers. That could almost be a fly right there. Um, yeah, so we'll probably do, yeah, probably about 16 fibers. It is going to be a longer wing, obviously. Um, oh, what did I say? This is going to be, what was it? 1, 2, 3? I might do I'm either going to do a pyramid build or just a straight, 2, 2, 2. Um, I'm going to start with the pyramid build, the 1, 2, 3. If I like it, we'll stick with it. I probably will stick with it just because it sounds good. I bet it'll look good too. Unfortunately, on this particular blue one, for the longer side, I don't have very good options. Either some ragged tips, see how ragged that is, or big old growth bar. However, because this is going to be on the far side wing, I might just use this anyway, because I don't really have an alternative. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to cut all the fibers that I need. And like usual, we'll marry up one side, and then we'll see how we like. Yeah, that'll be long enough. We'll marry up one side, and then we'll see how we like the way it looks, and then we'll marry up the other side. And speckled. Uh, what's the order here? Black, blue, speckled, or you know what? I cut blue from the wrong side of the feather. So is it black, blue, speckled? Hmm. Actually, I wonder, do I really need the black at all, or do I just go blue speckled? I think we go blue speckled. Yeah. All right. So we're gonna need a little bit more. Because otherwise, this is just gonna be 12 fibers. Um, let's see. So if I'm just doing two colors, ooh, I know. I will say I do the blue and claret color scheme a lot. I've noticed recently. Um, so I was hoping to dial it back a little bit, but I have to admit that a little bit of this red claret, like one or two like racing stripes running through the wing, would look great. Um, hmm. It's an interesting design question. If I'm trying not to use claret, then all right. Tell you what, I'm going to marry up part of this while I think on it, because I need to think on it. So I'm going to marry two and two with the blue. I'm going to do that twice. So I'm going to do yes, phone. I hear you. Phone's buzzing because I got a package at the door. Come on. There we go. Yeah, there we go. That's where the black. That's where the black comes in. All right. So we're gonna go two and two, blue, blue and speckled, and then it's going to be where did that fall? Where did the black slip go? Oh, don't tell me I threw it away. All right. Apparently, well, I'm sure I will find that later. But I think then a strip of black goes. let's see. And then how thick do we make that? 3 maybe? Just give it a little extra. All these design questions answering on the fly while making up a freestyle fly. Sorry, no pun intended. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go speckled. Now the question is this a thick enough wing for this fly? So I would say it's not. So we're just going to keep adding to this wing until it's right. But I always want to add. So for my aesthetic, the way I like things to look, I prefer for my wing to end on a neutral color. So if like I said, if you've ever seen me tie a salmon fly, like a full dress salmon fly, then you'll see that I always put like a larger chunk of golden pheasant usually as my uppermost slip in a wing, and so that's just because that's my aesthetic. That's the way I like it to look. There we go. It's pretty neat. It's a pretty wing. I think that'll look good on the fly. That's just my aesthetic. That's the way I like my flies or my wings to end. Um, you can, of course, you know, marry your wing in whatever order you want, but that's just the way I prefer it. So, right. Um, one, two, three, four, five, six, 10. Okay. So, marry up the other side, the other wing. Again, these wings are long. They have to be about as long as, like I said, a 6/0 salmon fly hook, just because this is long streamer hook. So you always have to keep that in mind whenever you're choosing your materials. Is one reason why I've chosen speckled mustard is because I know I can get my speckled mustard out to the appropriate length. Like I said, this particular turkey has a growth bar, and so growth bars are just um, they appear as like kind of streaking or like almost like bald patches in a feather, and those occur when during the growth of that feather, when that feather was being produced by uh, the bird for whatever reason underwent a period of stress. Maybe the bird got sick, or maybe it had lean times and it couldn't find enough food. Um, but it shows in the feather as that growth bar, as that kind of bald spot. Oop, nope, that's not right. Then three bars of black. Um, and they're not a big deal. Uh, they are, an indicator of the bird's health at the time, but you know, and they don't look very good when they're in a wing, but they happen. They're natural. Now, the reason why I went with 3 bars of black instead of 2 bars of black when I've gone 2 bars of everything else is because black, being such a dark color, is going to get swallowed up in the wing. It's not going to appear as prominently as the brighter colors, relatively speaking, of the blue and the speckled. So it's one of those things. It's a little bit contrary to some other art forms. I think I wouldn't know. I wasn't a fine artist, but my general sense is that in a lot of visual arts, the brighter something is, or like the paler something is, the less prominent it becomes. In fly tying, especially in a married wing, the brighter a color is, so like, or the paler the color is, the less obvious it becomes. Especially if you're marrying, single fibers or double fibers. Um, so that's just something to keep in mind. Uh, Conversely, if you use large chunks of white, they can be, super overpowering. Um, yeah, it's one of those things to keep in mind is if you're marrying in. Sorry, I think I actually said that backwards. Darker colors will get swallowed up, appear less. I think I've been saying white or pale. It's the dark colors that get swallowed up. It's the bright colors, the white colors that are overpowering. Um, it's actually one of the problems that I have with a lot of people with a lot of flies. Like people do like red, white, and blue flies for uh, you know patriotic holidays, and it's my opinion, my opinion, my aesthetic. But I think they use too much white. They tend to make the red, white, and blue like equal in like number of fibers or equal in number of turns of silk, and when they do that, the white just becomes way overpowering to me. Um, and uh, and so like in designing the fly, I think the white would be more effective either used, broken up into smaller pieces. So tied in, uh, in a mixed wing in like ones and twos, uh, you know, single or double fibers, or if you use less. So instead of using, 1/3 red, 1/3 white, 1/3 blue, use like 25% white, and then the balance split between red and blue. Just so that the white doesn't become uh, too prominent, too overpowering, and you start to lose. It starts to like wash out the other colors. Um, that's just my personal aesthetic. It's one of the reasons why I tend to stay away from, uh, you know, doing red, white, and blue flies, or Michigan State flies. Um, you don't want to use too much white because then you start to lose the other colors. Okay, so here's the wing. Just gonna tie it as low and as fairly long. We'll tie it in just like it was a salmon fly wing. So use that same technique where I pinch and I'm lifting up the butt ends here, and I'm gently lifting up a little bit just to set that hump here in the wing. So there you can see how the wing sets here. And I'm just going to gently increase the pressure, and I'm always pinching it so that it doesn't collapse. Continue. And what this does is it compresses um, the, the feather fibers at the tie-in point without allowing them to crumple, if that makes sense. So you get a nicely set wing, and after a little bit of practice, you can get it a nicely set wing first try. Most times, not all the time. You all have seen my mistakes and mess ups and oopsies, but in general, that works pretty well. And this is going back to fly tire. This is a technique that I learned from Fly Tire magazine. I think it was like a 1997 issue. Uh, so yes, I have a long history with Fly Tire. I don't know if my microphone is working. If somebody could say in chat if my microphone is working, because I just noticed that the bars have gone away. Hello. Hmm. All right. So I'm gonna wax my thread. A couple turns just to secure, and then I'm going to trim. So there we go. I'm a little bit concerned that my audio isn't working. Could somebody say something in chat if you can hear me? It would be really bad if I've been chatting to myself for the last hour and 10 minutes. Okay, so we'll just keep going. So I had an idea for the sides that I was going to use bronze mallard as kind of like a nod to the fact that this is more like a salmon fly than a real streamer, or than like a, you know, Carrie Stevens style streamer. Except all I've got are these. Well, they're fairly large. Not quite. Um, Not quite what I had in mind. Maybe. Um, so let's see. Let me pick a matching pair here. Let's go kink it. So not quite right. Maybe. If I did summer deck, that might be too much. Too bright. I may just go with a like a jungle cock neck feather and eye. Well, there's one option. Okay. Yeah, let's do that. Okay. So I'm just putting this one on to see if I like it. If I do, I think it's a little bit long. Maybe about that long. Yeah, like that. So I'll tie this side on, and then I'll show you, or I'll tie the other side on so you guys can see. Okay, so basically what it is this slight honey tipped jungle cock neck feather. Like so. And an eye. Like so. There we go. Great. And now I'm just going to finish the head, and we'll be done. So, wax thread as always. All right, gonna whip finish there. Grab my Kelsons. All right, there we go. That is my freestyle married wing freestyle married wing streamer. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Again, if you want to see more of my work, justwondering.brad on Instagram. And if you want to support the channel, purchase any of the flags you've seen me tie, is Studio1213 on Etsy. Thanks for hanging out. I hope everybody's had a good and safe holiday weekend, and I will talk to you next time.